Welcome to the Patriot Training YouTube channel. My name is Clay Howell. I am the owner and head firearms instructor of Patriot Training. The topic for this video is AR-15 ammunition selection. What kind of AR-15 ammunition should you use? Well, of course you should pick ammunition that is in the right caliber. And so we're going to talk about specifically the 5.56 millimeter and the 223. No, they are not interchangeable. Most AR-15s have the 5.56 chambering and therefore can shoot both kinds of ammunition. So let's stick with that. Other calibers, there's going to be a whole different talk about that later. The question is, what kind of ammo should you use? And there are two major types of ammunition for your typical 5.56 millimeter AR that are available in bulk for relatively inexpensive prices. And broadly speaking, you have your 55 grain and your 62 grain ammunition. And let's talk about each one for a moment. Your 62 grain ammunition is often green tip ammo, and that is patterned to be similar to the military M855 round. The 55 grain ammunition is patterned to resemble the former military round called M193. And so that's what we're going to really dig into. Which one of these should you bulk up on and should you buy? And I find so many people buy in bulk the 62 grain green tip ammunition, and they have some misconceptions, and I'm here to bust those real quick. Green tip ammunition, the 62 grain green tip, tends to be more expensive. It tends to be about 7 to 10% more expensive. That's not only at the time of this video, that's for as long as I've been shooting it, many years. Green tip 62 grain ammunition tends to be less accurate. Some of the best studies I've seen out of match grade barrels put green tip at 4.5 to 5 MOA at best on their best day, and with some of the best shooters. And if that's not you, you can expect 6 MOA or worse, and that's just not really good. Meanwhile, the vast majority of the 55 grain ammunition I see patterns at 3 MOA or less, usually hovering right around 2.5 minutes of angle. So we're talking about a 2.5 inch group at 100 yards versus a 5 or 6 inch group at 100 yards. Green tip has a lower velocity. Why is that important? Well, rifles are effective because of high velocity. So when you reduce that velocity, draw your own conclusions there. Because of a reduced velocity, green tip is much less likely to fragment, and fragmentation is a big part of why the 5.56 millimeter round is so effective. It's not the only part of it, but it's a big part of it. Green tip is much less likely to fragment. 55 grain is much more likely to fragment. So in summary on what kind of ammunition to get, I'm going to go with 55 grain all the way. The only technical advantage I could find that means anything to me for the green tip was that it does have a better ballistic coefficient, so it hypothetically bucks the wind a little better at distance. And I'm going to make two comments about that. Number one, you shouldn't be shooting either out to 400, 500 yards or beyond unless just absolutely necessary. You should be shooting something heavier like a good 77 grain ammunition. But secondly, the green tip, how will you know it's less accurate and getting bucked by the wind less? If it's 6 minutes of angle, 6 minutes of angle at 500 yards is going to translate into 30 inches. 30 inches versus the 2.5 minute of angle. We're talking about, even if it's 3 minutes of angle with the 55 grain, we're talking about half that size. We're talking about only 15 inches. So how will you know that the green tip got blown off target less, somewhat less? you're not going to be able to see where the group went. It's going to be all over the place. So that said, 55 grain is less expensive, more accurate, higher velocity, more effective. Buy 55 grain ammunition and buy in bulk and buy with confidence. Make sure you buy all the same brand, all the same type, or else it will not shoot to the same point of impact. The second thing we are going to compare is going to be brass-cased ammunition versus steel. The only thing steel has going for it is less expensive. And historically, and including at the time of this video, historically it's about 10 to 15% less expensive, which is enough to raise an eyebrow. But let me tell you what you're getting, because you get what you pay for. And that reduction in cost results in a lower velocity on average. I've seen many steel-cased ammunitions chronographed, and they just don't chronograph very well. The brass-cased 55 grain ammunition out of a 20-inch barrel tends to run about 3,200 feet per second, and I've seen some Wolf run out of this rifle at 2,800 feet per second. So it's putting you at a disadvantage. The other thing is it tends to be, steel-cased ammunition tends to be just really unreliable. Boom, boom, blah, boom, boom, blah. You know, you're having malfunctions all day, every day. So you say, well, Clay, you said the M193 was cheaper than the green tip. Yes, that's because more people want green tip. It's a higher demand kind of a thing, and green tip has also got the steel core in it, which costs a little bit more to manufacture. It's not better. But in this case, brass versus steel, you're paying a little bit more for a little bit higher quality, and you need that quality. Run steel-cased ammunition in communist guns, SKS, AK-47, AK-74. They love the steel. Feed them steel. American guns, AR-15s, run brass-cased ammunition through them. I touched on this a moment ago, but what about for precision? I recommend a good 77 grain match ammunition, with a very few exceptions. I have a good friend who has a match grade rifle, and he gets really good performance out of some 69 grain ammunition from Federal, and sometimes it doesn't hit quite as hard, it doesn't buck the wind quite as much, but he's learning his dope on that, and it's still a very accurate, very effective round, and his gun loves it. I've seen him print some 3/4 minute groups with that out of that AR-15. Really good stuff. And the other exception is Hornady sells a match grade 75 grain ammunition, and that stuff, in my estimation, I've shot about 3,000 rounds of it, and in my observation, that Hornady match just really mimics the 77 grain very closely on the ballistics. The drop, point of impact, all tends to be about the same. It bucks the wind about the same as the 77 grain stuff. There's just if there's a difference, it's a hair's breadth. That's all. So ammunition choices for your bulk ammunition: bulk up with 55 grain, make it brass cased. For precision, use a good 77 grain, something that your rifle likes. Try a bunch of different types and then see what your rifle likes, and then shoot that one the most. Stick to a make and model and bulk up on that. Make sure you separate your precision from your 55 grain. Get trained, learn how to run it well, learn how to shoot it accurately, and practice those things. Until then, I'd like to remind you that you don't have to be a patriot to train, but you do have to train. If you want to consider yourself to be a real patriot, take care.